This entire scene was done so goddamn well, and while they still didn't manage to play #1 on cue vocal-wise, they did manage it overall with the song, and it sounded fantastic. Furthermore, even if they're manga accurate, I'm not the biggest fan in the change of the colors, because it's literally piss yellow, but the black and white Getsuga is quite possibly the cleanest shit I've ever seen. The animation itself wasn't heavy on any type of choreography, but Bleach has always been a more effects-heavy series, and they've handled that wonderfully in this episode with all the sparks and pretty colors.
The color pretty so good.
The direction was excellent, and you could tell it was filled with flares from Akudama Drive, with things like the constant scenery porn and wide shots to display how good the city looked, as well as a lot of the angles used in the shot composition, like my favorite being this upward-facing one looking at the moon, which, speaking of, it was a bit cheesy for Inosuke to see the moon as he dies, only to be saved by the literal moon fang from Strawberry. Get it, because that's Getsuga tinge. But that's peak Bleach, so I can't really be mad. Likewise, you could see a lot of Kubo's personal flair in this episode as well, what with the fonts used in the title and incorporating the volume poems at the end of the episode, so it's just more confirmation that he's 100% behind the project in case you were still doubting it, because you're an idiot. There were a few small cuts, mostly gags of the new guy making fun of the new girl and playing the hollow chasing him as pure horror rather than horror and comedy like in the manga, but it's nothing major, and it's to be expected that they're not going to adapt it 1-to-1 when it's only 52 episodes long. But 1-to-1 adaptations are almost always shit anyway, so I'm glad that they didn't, especially since they'll be adding in new stuff later on. So if the removal of a few gags, since this episode was still comedic overall, means that we still get episodes in this movie-like quality, then I guess it's a small price to pay. I do hope they bring back some things though, but I'm happy with what we got, as well as with you pressing that subscribe button. Yeah, that was subtle. Either way, the biggest takeaway from this new series is that it actually moves, unlike the previous one. Wild shit, I know. But in general, the action was a lot more dynamic and looked fantastic during Strawberry versus the Quincy Ronkar. The CG hollows were a little iffy, and some of the shots of them were pretty bad, but it does make them feel a bit creepier and monster-like, and I also doubt that they show up much after this, so it's not too big of a deal. The lighting was also immaculate in this episode, with the amount of times it shifted compared to the single fucking light they'd use in the original, and the art was... The brown filter effect in Strawberry's room did make everyone look a bit off, but it's only present in the one scene, and the OST was as great as expected, and I absolutely loved the remix version of the older OSTs, like #1, but more importantly, they managed to retain the character writing, as Strawberry kicking the bad guy for not getting off his bed was very in character for his delinquent facade, and trying to be cool by handling it all on his own, as well as playing along and using his bankai when he didn't have to, because he thought it was cool, is very in line with his showboating Chunibyo. The new Quincy plotline seems like it's going to be fantastic, and it's already looking extremely fun with immediate death in the first episode. Well, that guy's fucking dead. Honestly, the uncensored gore was fantastic, the special ED was fun, I wish he'd suck me like that, and it was definitely worth rewatching the old series despite how bad it was, because this was fucking peak. Bleach 1000-Year Blood War, I can't breathe, has continued to be an absolute treat with how stellar its production is, on top of adding new material to elaborate on what was in the manga. Yo, where were they hiding those swords? They brought back the cool title cards from the original anime, but managed to make them even more dynamic by showing them on a severed arm. Yo, that's rad as fuck. The new director is absolutely killing it with the lighting as well, and it still throws me off that not only do we have actual different lighting for different scenes, unlike the god-awful original series, but we also have the lighting being used symbolically on top of that. Like having Strawberry jumping through the city in broad daylight, yet is shadowed over because he's both a ghost, an existence that exists outside of normal sight and perception, but also because it's used to illustrate the doubt that's currently been cast over him by the recent events. It's just, mwah. The new pieces of the OST have also been a treat, and while I'd like to hear some more of the older soundtracks remixed in a similar way to #1 from the first episode, the new tracks themselves have been pretty fantastic. I do think some of the epic choir pieces sound a bit generic, but I love the marching one that was used in this episode, as well as the new violin piece used when Strawberry and the gang are feeling sad and confused. Speaking of the music, the OP and ED were rather average to me, and they're certainly not beating Chain, Rampuro Melody, or Harukaze anytime soon, but they weren't bad, and I feel like they'll grow on me with time. But the decision to have the OP be so stylized with monochrome coloring on everything but the vibrant pink background was a little hit or miss for me. The blank background is definitely representative of Kubo, and it's a nice touch, but as a result, the OP doesn't really pop as much as it should, and it just leaves me going, compared to other OPs in the series. It was definitely heavy on fucking spoilers, though. The series is also committed to having zero censorship whatsoever, as a Hachi punches a guy and his fucking head comes off. Yo, that's right. And we get to see Hottie Bell in all her glory. You think they're breeding her? But the main takeaway is the direction and pacing, something the original series struggled with because the writing remains solid as they've introduced these new Quincy enemies, but they don't waste any time meandering and the plot just moves forward because it's simple enough for the audience to pick up alongside some clever direction. Like this quiet scene of the head captain and his lieutenant displaying all of his rage and sorrow with no words or music accompanying it, and with Yamamoto lighting the fire for his lieutenant's funeral, but it cuts to Ichigo's sister lighting the burner on their stove. I would drown them in a bowl of my cum! The new villain is in stark contrast to Aizen because whereas Aizen was the main character who never directly killed his comrades and supported them more than anything, as seen with Stark, and even went so far as to cut down Hottie Bell to save her from being killed by the Soul Reapers, this new guy, the leader of the Quincy's, is completely different. He's very clearly an actual villain who uses people like tools and disposes of them once he's done, be they comrades or not, and he's a lot less suave about it in general. God, things I'd let Aizen do to me. But I feel like he'll grow on me over time, even if he can't live up to Aizen's greatest moments. Likewise, the pacing has been nice and brisk without feeling like it's moving too fast, despite the fact that it's adapting about 4 to 5 chapters an episode, and whenever the episodes end, it just leaves me wanting more, which just means it's doing an excellent job as an adaptation. The animation in the fights also remains fantastic, and the fact that it has dynamic movement makes me nut every time, specifically on this one. Bleach 1000-Year Blood War has been absolutely stellar and has continued to impress throughout its 3 episodes so far, unless you're an idiot and think this looks worse than this.
Use your bankai, niño!
They brought the title cards back in full force with an entire few seconds dedicated just to it forming, that's cool as fuck, before hopping right back into the action. The episode isn't perfect though, as it does only adapt 6 chapters, which is pretty slow by Bleach standards. It could have stood to adapt even more rather than this episode being filled with so much exposition, but I can't knock it too much for having Walmart Aizen explain the Quincy vs. Soul Reaper drama since it's been 17 years since it was last brought up in episode 14. Wait, 17? The fact that they opted to include anime original material for Uryu and Ryukin was a fantastic idea as they were severely underused in the manga in an arc that should have been all about them. Cutting out small scenes like the lieutenant's meeting is a worthy sacrifice for not only these scenes, but also the quickened pace, meaning that future episodes will not only be able to add more to fights, and possibly even add entire fights that weren't in the manga, but we may also get light novel material adapted as well. Even if we don't, 1-to-1 adaptations are bad anyways, as anime is a completely different medium, and thus the staff on the project should make use of it to elevate the material, which is exactly what they're doing. Yo, why you run like that? The remix versions of the OST are exactly what I wanted in the last video as well, and the anime delivered here because they're obviously listening to everything I say. Yeah, I'm him. But I will say that some of them were just a smidge lackluster in comparison to their original versions. It's not a deal breaker and they still sound good, but I'm also hoping that we'll get to hear some of the originals for really special scenes to really drive... That's my meat in November. The animation and direction continue to be stellar in this episode as well, and although the loop between Strawberry and Quilgay went on for a little too long, it still made use of different angles to keep your attention while you listen to what Quilgay was explaining. Likewise, the animation on display, even if looped, still looked better than what Dragon Ball typically does, and it looks way better than anything the OG would have done, where they likely would have just sat there as Quilgay explained everything to Ichigo with no fighting whatsoever. If you think this isn't good animation, then you may very well just have shit taste, and holy shit, that guy's fat. The lack of censorship is also certainly highlighting how bleak this arc is, as well as all the savagery that accompanies it, because there's nothing more savage than Getsuga Tensho not working. No way! Who could have seen that coming? The pacing is likewise moving along swimmingly, as it's moving fast but not too fast, and I was never bored or wondering when it'd go back to Strawberry, even during the scenes that were arguably not needed because it was still pretty to look at. Showing Uryu's side alongside Strawberry and the Soul Society really helps to keep the pace and keeps the audience on their toes, but my only real complaint so far is how quick all the action scenes have been. I'm hoping we get to see some all-out action next episode because all we've gotten thus far are just short bursts, and I really want to see some amazing looking prolonged action in this beautiful clean style. They've got 52 episodes to work with though, which is the perfect amount for 4 chapters an episode pacing, but the fact that they're adapting even more than that basically just cinches that we'll get exactly what I'm asking for in the coming episodes, and hopefully we get more of Tress Bestia. No, not the hot one! Bleach 1000-Year Blood War had a bit of an issue. I can only become so erect. But it's okay because it showed us that true love will stand the test of time. I missed you, Floor. The One Piece style recap in the beginning made me physically ill. Oh god, please stop! But they did use slightly different music tracks during it to make it worthwhile to revisit it just to hear some of the additional remix tracks. It wasn't good by any means though, because that loss of 3 minutes made it feel as if the episode was jumping around way too much to focus on any one thing. I was joking last video when I said they should make the pace faster, because this episode did just that and was fast-paced even by Bleach standards, which isn't a good thing. The other scenes really needed those 3 minutes of wasted time for smoother transitions and less jittering through events, and it could have gone to the extension of a few of the fights that we got this episode. But with the series looking better than ever despite that, I won't complain too much so long as it doesn't become a recurring thing. And not to mention, the episode starts especially strong right after the recap with Walmart Aizen losing to Walmart Jesus. Holy fuck, that's cool. And then making way for brief fights from the other captains where they all not only get styled on, but also continue to show that ghost Nazis don't think when they fight. Captain, don't use your Bankai! Fuck you, I do what I want. Fuck you, Renji. It was fun watching the Soul Society get their just desserts, and the added scenes with Bambietta, my wife, and the other Stern Ritter were cool. Damn, it's blacked out. But they felt a bit lackluster to the previous episodes, likely because of the aforementioned jumpy pacing. While the previous episodes felt very polished despite adapting roughly the same number of chapters, this one simply felt functional, and that it wasn't bad, but it wasn't outstanding either. But my baby is. It was a fairly eventful section of chapters adapted, but the recap wasted almost a full chapter worth of runtime, resulting in it feeling like it was a bit everywhere, but the episode was still enjoyable overall. Yo, he blocked it with his fucking eye, and it maintained the rule of cool all throughout, especially when Strawberry was just casually styling on Quilgay as Quilgay monologued to himself about how awesome Strawberry was. It's peak Bleach, and it's still a lot of fun, but it's just not as perfect as I would have hoped, especially in the Byakuya scenes, as I kind of liked how Simba and Sakura used to look despite how much I give the original anime shit. Here, while it does look more like Blades, it doesn't look nearly as vibrant and even looks a bit cheap in some scenes, but we did get added scenes with Soifon, so I'd say it's a fair trade. Why the fuck does she have the coat on? The overuse of speed lines was also mildly annoying, but the compositing, directing, angles, and so on are all still fantastic, so that's probably just my personal distaste for them speaking, but what I'd give to taste her! This episode being subpar and the previous episode needing a lot of staff on it to be finished likely just means that they're putting their entire Bleachussy into the big fights coming later this season. But whether it was worth it or not will remain to be seen until those episodes air. However, that doesn't mean that this episode was inherently bad, and was rather just a slight step down in quality compared to the previous three, as opposed to something nigh unwatchable like the original would have delivered. I may have qualms with some of it, like some of the Stern Ritter being kind of hit or miss, but what was here was good, and if I could take a cereal bowl, fill it up with my cum, and drown Bambietta and Ichigo's sisters in it, I could die a happy man. God damn, Bleach is amazing! Oh, I can't control it! Fuck, where did it go? Not only did it look immaculate, look at those frames, but it also followed up an already banging episode in episode 5. Just when you thought they couldn't top Byakuya dying, you think it hurt? They give you quite possibly one of the best and most well-animated fights this year in Head Ghost Nazi versus Hitler Christ. Hiroyuki Yamashita, the guy who did all your favorite Naruto fights, directed this episode perfectly when it came to the action, and when mixed in with the regular directing from the series thus far, we get some amazing action set pieces fit with the stellar angles and shots the show has been delivering thus far.
Can only come so much.
Spending the effort to flesh out Uruyu's role in this arc before the battle begins, clarifying some of the timeline to help his side of the story feel less undercooked, was a great touch. You think he gets homeless, BJs? But they wasted no time getting right into the action following right after it, with speed lines and repeated animation, which arguably still look good in previous episodes, being a thing of the past, as you can follow their movements in relation to each other the entire time, and their insistence to still remain on model for the character designs during the battle gives the movements a lot more weight to them and makes everything feel that much more heavy and realistic, despite very clearly going for that slightly off-model, fluid animation of most great Naruto fights that's so goddamn cool! It manages to blend the styles perfectly, and that results in a fantastic fight all the way through that doesn't let up for a second while still managing to deliver on the story side of things, what with displaying Head Ghost Nazi's absurd level of arrogance even during the battle where he quite literally mocks fake Christ for being weak, only to then get absolutely styled on by true Christ, while still maintaining sleek animation and stellar direction all throughout, which is exactly how a proper fight should be handled. Oh, he must know the Gundam guy. The way Head Ghost Nazi chides fake Christ for being flippant with the lies of his subordinates, as if he's not literally the exact same, and believing that his Bankai can't be stolen because he's hot shit, it's funny laugh, as well as his elitism and believing that Ghost Nazi lives matter more than Angel Nazis, makes it all the more satisfying when True Christ appears and trivializes him so utterly, not only cutting him down in a single blow, but it also comes right after telling him that his BFF Aizen was more important than him. Fuck, man. Up until that moment, Head Ghost Nazi fully believed he could end the invasion himself, and it's very possible that he could have had he had Orihime restore his arm, but he'd never rely on a filthy Alivey, as his entire character is used to illustrate and show how the Soul Society are a bunch of stubborn douchebags, and that the real bad guys of the show have been them the entire time, only becoming the good guys as people like Yamamoto are wiped out, and the rest are either shown the light by Strawberry, or have always known it like Shunsui. Join me. No, I fuck you then. Wait, you still a bitch. It's amazing that all that information can be packed into an episode primarily about cool action and explosive flames, but that just goes to show how well Kubo's work is being adapted and how much the staff understands and knows how to enhance the source material. I may have an old man fetish. My only complaint about this episode, aside from some of the action not moving as fluidly as I would have liked, is that the music was rather lackluster. Sagisu's work on the OST is stellar, and this show is basically his baby, but whoever is in charge of choosing the music for each scene is absolutely defecating all over the show, as they seem to insist on not using older tracks from the previous anime, and even though Sagisu has developed like 50 plus new pieces, they still insist on continuing to use the same ones over and over again, even when they barely fit the scenes. Who got you smiling like that, dog? As much as I like the music, this has consistently been one of the show's weakest points since episode 3, and it doesn't seem like it'll change anytime soon, which is extremely unfortunate if true. Fortunately, we did get to see the main character again, and this episode is not only one of the best to come from anime this year, but also anything to ever come from the original anime, to the point where it's actually kinda sad how bad it is in comparison, though it did have better music choices. As great as the fight was, it did use CG, which is something the original never did, but its usage here really accentuated the movements and feel that they were going for as a whole. I'd fuck a skeleton, honestly, rather than being distracting and feeling cheap. The pacing is likewise damn near perfect, as ending on Head Ghost Nazi getting cut down was a perfect touch to generate more intrigue for the next episode, and I can only hope that it's even better than this one to cement Bleach as one of the best shonen alongside Fire Force and Iruma, but click here for another great show.